Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us today.
It's good to be back.
We're going to be looking at Hosea chapter 2, verse 19 today.
All right.
I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful verse.
It really is, and I think we could talk about this for hours, but we're going to kind of narrow it down today to some of the things that we think are most important in this passage.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that really stood out to me when I was looking at this was this idea of betrothal. What does that even mean?
Yeah, well, in the ancient Near East, betrothal was a lot more serious than even engagement is today.
Okay.
It was a binding agreement. It was like a legal contract almost.
Oh, what?
And so it was really serious. And so when God says that he's going to betroth his people to himself, he's saying that he's making a serious commitment to them.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that too. Like, this isn't just something that's, kind of flimsy or temporary. This is something that is a covenant.
Yeah.
It's a
absolutely
agreement.
Yeah, it's a covenant relationship. And it's interesting that, in the ancient Near East, it was actually the father of the bride and the father of the groom who would make the agreement.
Okay.
And so you see this kind of interesting parallel here where God is both the father of the bride and the father of the groom.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because he's the one who's initiating this covenant.
Wow.
He's the one who's pursuing his people, and he's the one who's making this commitment to them.
So he's kind of on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. And so I think that speaks to the depth of his love for his people.
Yeah. And it makes me think about how we so often approach our relationship with God as if we were the ones in control.
Right.
We're the ones who are initiating. We're the ones who are, making the first move.
Right.
But this is saying, no, it's God who is pursuing us.
It's God who takes the initiative.
He is the one who's reaching out to us. He's the one who is making this commitment.
Absolutely.
And that, to me, is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's a radical thought, I think. And it's something that we need to be reminded of over and over again.
Yeah.
We tend to fall into this mindset that we have to earn God's love or that we have to somehow prove ourselves to him. But the truth is that he loves us unconditionally. And he's the one who's initiated this relationship with us.
And I think that is so encouraging, especially when we feel like we've messed up or we feel like we're not good enough.
Right.
Because it's in those moments that we need to remember that God is still pursuing us.
Absolutely.
He is still the one who is reaching out to us. He's the one who's making this commitment to us.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, too, that God's pursuit of us is not based on our performance.
Right.
He doesn't love us because we're good or because we've earned it. He loves us simply because he's God.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of love that we need.
Yeah, and that's where I think, this verse goes on to say that he will betroth us in righteousness and justice.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting because we often think of those words as being very kind of legalistic and kind of cold and impersonal.
Right.
But I think in this context, they're actually very warm.
Yeah.
And very relational.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because they're talking about the character of God.
Right.
And the foundation of this relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because when we think about righteousness and justice, we often think about them in terms of like a courtroom setting.
Yeah.
Where there's a judge and there's a jury and there's a defendant and somebody's going to be found guilty and somebody's going to be found innocent.
Right.
But I think in this context, righteousness and justice are more about the character of God.
Okay.
And they're about the foundation of our relationship with him.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction to make because when we think about it in terms of a courtroom setting, it's very much like you said.
Right.
Somebody's guilty, somebody's innocent, and there's a punishment. But when we think about it in terms of the character of God, it's like, okay, God is righteous.
Right.
He is just.
Yeah.
And because of that, he is faithful to his promises.
Right.
He is loving. He's compassionate.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, too, that God's righteousness and justice are not in conflict with his love and compassion.
Right.
In fact, they're actually the foundation of his love and compassion.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because God is righteous, he can't just overlook our sin.
Right.
He can't just pretend like it doesn't exist.
Right.
But because he's also compassionate, he's provided a way for us to be forgiven of our sin.
Okay.
And that way is through Jesus Christ.
So it's like his righteousness demands that sin be dealt with.
Right.
But his love and compassion provide the way for that to happen.
That's exactly right.
Okay. So we have God pursuing us.
Yeah.
He's initiating this relationship.
Yeah.
He is the one who is making this covenant with us, and he does it in righteousness and justice,
Right.
which is a reflection of his character. And it actually is the foundation for his love and his compassion.
Absolutely.
So this is pretty amazing already.
It is.
This is a really good foundation for understanding
Yeah.
what it means to be in a relationship with God.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably take a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about the love and compassion piece.
That sounds good. All right, so we're talking about love and compassion.
Love and compassion.
Yeah.
Those are big words.
Huge.
What do they even mean?
Well, I think in this context, when we're talking about God's love and compassion, we're talking about something that is so much bigger than anything that we can even imagine.
Okay.
It's a love that is unconditional.
Okay.
It's a love that is unchanging.
Okay.
It's a love that is so deep and so profound that it's hard to even put into words.
So when you say it's bigger than anything we can imagine,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
I think as humans, we tend to think about love in very limited terms.
Mhm.
We think about love as being something that is based on feelings or something that is based on, what we get out of it.
Right.
But God's love is not like that.
Okay.
God's love is not based on anything
Okay.
and he is love.
So this is a different kind of love than what we're used to.
It's a different kind of love. It's a love that is selfless.
Okay.
It's a love that is sacrificial.
Okay.
It's a love that is always giving.
All right.
It's a love that never fails.
So this is the kind of love that God has for us,
Yeah.
even though we don't deserve it.
Even though we don't deserve it, even though we mess up,
Yeah.
even though we turn away from him,
Even though we're not perfect,
even though we're not perfect,
he still loves us
he still loves us.
with this unconditional,
Yeah.
selfless, sacrificial, never failing love.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It really is. I mean, it's mind-blowing when you really think about it.
It is.
And it's so countercultural.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything in our world tells us that love is earned.
Right.
We have to be a certain way.
Right.
We have to look a certain way. We have to act a certain way
Right.
in order to be loved.
Right.
But God is saying, no,
You're already loved.
I love you just the way you are.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to stop loving you
Right.
no matter what you do.
Yeah, that's the gospel.
I think that that's the good news.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what we need to be reminded of over and over again.
Absolutely.
Especially in a world that is so full of hate and so full of judgment and so full of rejection.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the reasons why this verse is so important is because it reminds us that we are loved.
Yeah.
And that we are accepted and that we belong.
Yeah.
And that's something that we all need to hear.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to remember that this love that God has for us is not just a feeling.
Right.
It's not just something that he says.
Right.
It's something that he demonstrates in his actions.
Right.
And I think the ultimate demonstration of his love is the cross.
Absolutely.
When Jesus died on the cross for us, he was showing us the depth of his love.
Yeah.
He was showing us that he was willing to give everything for us, even his own life.
Yeah.
And so I think when we're struggling to believe that God loves us, we need to look to the cross.
Yeah. That's the ultimate proof of his love.
It is. And I think it's also a reminder that his love is not just something that happened in the past.
Right.
It's not just something that we read about in the Bible.
Right.
It's something that is still happening today.
Yeah, he's still pursuing us.
He's still pursuing us.
Yeah.
He's still loving us.
Yeah.
He's still calling us to himself.
Yeah. And he's still working in our lives, to make us more like him.
And I think that that's really what it means to be betrothed to Christ.
Yeah.
It means that we are in this covenant relationship with him.
Right.
Where he is pursuing us.
Yeah.
He is loving us.
Yeah.
He is transforming us.
Yeah. And he's preparing us for something even greater.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that then.
Right. Yeah. So he's preparing us for something even greater. We've been talking about this idea of betrothal.
Right.
But, the betrothal period, it's just a temporary period.
Okay.
It's a time of preparation for the wedding.
Okay.
And so in the same way, we are betrothed to Christ now, but we are looking forward to the wedding feast of the Lamb.
The wedding feast of the Lamb. Okay. So tell me more about that, because I've heard that phrase, but I don't really know what it means.
Well, the wedding feast of the Lamb is described in the book of Revelation.
Okay.
And it's this incredible picture of God's people from all nations and all tribes and all tongues gathered together in heaven to celebrate the marriage of Christ to his bride.
Okay, so Christ is the groom.
Christ is the groom.
And the church is the bride.
That's right.
Okay.
And so this is the culmination of God's plan of redemption.
Okay.
This is what he's been working towards from the very beginning.
So this is like the ultimate goal.
This is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
This is the happy ending to the story.
And it's a feast.
It's a feast. Yeah. There's going to be food, and there's going to be music, and there's going to be dancing.
Okay, so we're talking about a party.
We're talking about a party.
Yeah.
A party that's going to last for eternity.
Oh, wow. So this is like the ultimate celebration.
The ultimate celebration.
Okay, so we have this betrothal period now.
Right.
Where we're getting to know Christ.
Then our lives should be characterized by joy.
Okay.
And hope and anticipation.
Okay.
We should be living with the eager expectation of seeing Christ face to face.
Okay.
And we should be living in a way that honors him and that glorifies him.
So this should change the way that we live now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just about looking forward to this future event,
right,
but it's about letting that future event shape the way that we live today.
That's right. Yeah. It's like if you're engaged to be married,
okay,
you start making preparations for the wedding.
Right.
You start planning, and you start, getting things ready, and so in the same way, we should be preparing ourselves for the wedding feast of the Lamb.
So we should be making ourselves ready.
Yeah, making ourselves ready. And part of that is living in a way that honors Christ, and that reflects his love.
So how do we do that?
Well, I think that's a question that we could spend a lot of time talking about.
Yeah.
But I think that some of the key things would be to be spending time in God's word.
Okay.
To be praying regularly.
Okay.
To be fellowshipping with other believers.
Yeah.
And to be sharing the gospel with others.
So it's about growing in our relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
And it's about sharing that relationship with others.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Because the wedding feast of the Lamb is not just for us.
Right.
It's for everyone who believes in Jesus Christ.
So it's for all of God's people.
It's for all of God's people.
Okay. Well, this has been a really encouraging conversation.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too, and I think it's given us a lot to think about as we continue to walk with Christ and as we look forward to that ultimate celebration, the wedding feast of the Lamb.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.